With Daybreak, we're getting into the tail end of this conversation, just looking at the quick wins for SME sector, how to grow your SME sector. We had asked you that question earlier on 22422. Just text us your name and where you're texting from. You can also tweet at Trevor Mbija, Citizen TV Kenya. Hashtag Daybreak. Let's see what you're saying. Let's bring them up and see. Nixon from Kindaruma says, SME growth is never by mere chance. It is the result of forces working together. The only strategy that is guaranteed to fail is not taking risks. Okay. Joseph from Mombasa says, biggest challenge to grow an SME is lack of mentorship. Every person you approach sees your business as a competition. Davis from Bitter says, one can be optimistic of starting a business, but he or she lacks the initial capital. And on the other side, he or she is unable to acquire a loan. How can this be helped? Okay. CPA John Okumu from Kisumu says, how to grow SME: proper record keeping, owner self-discipline on use of funds, family support, compliance with the legal requirements such as single business permit, taxes, and innovative and alert to new opportunities. All right, let's see what else you're saying online at Trevor Mbija at Citizen TV Kenya. Use the hashtag Daybreak. Oindi Sam says, nearly almost everybody would wish and is yearning to invest in whatever form. However, the challenge being what to invest, considering the lack of employment and heavy taxation, etc. How do you decide? Shonko says, I think there is a need to have business training from the grassroots and have them understand the art of doing business. Most people jump into investing a lot of money before doing a market analysis, which is a key aspect in the success of businesses. All right, is that it? Brilliant. We'll keep them coming. We'll read some of them there also. And we have a caller online, Boniface from Kitui, I believe. Boniface, good morning.
Morning.
Yes, go ahead with your comment or question, Boniface.
Yes, yangu ilikuwa nasema.
Yes, sir.
Kama mimi sasa ni to support that. Inatengeneza vitu na banana fiber.
Yes.
And they are so good.
Yeah.
What I don't have is soko, the marketing.
Okay.
If I can get marketing and I show them zionekane huko.
Yeah.
Zinapendwa nje sababu kuna wakati nilikuwa ninaziuza kwa Americans na watu kutoka London.
Yeah.
Na wanazitaka sana.
Okay.
Sasa kile natafuta.
Yeah.
Ni mfadhili mtu aje azione, akishaziona atafute soko.
Okay.
Akitafuta soko, yeah. Naweza fundisha more than 1,000 even a million.
Okay. Boniface, niko na swali moja hapo. Hapo penye huko saizi ni watu wangapi wanatengeneza vitu na banana fiber kama wewe? Ama ni wewe?
Nawafundisha. Kuna wale kuna watu nimewafundisha.
Okay. Sawa. Asante.
Yes.
Thank you. That's Boniface from Kitui. He says he makes stuff with banana fiber, but now his main concern is lack of market again. Yes. Access to market, and that's exactly what we're talking about. How would we tilt the scale to favor Kenya?
I think one of the things that I wanted to mention earlier was the whole question of, somebody mentioned something about entrepreneurship education.
Yeah.
And one of the challenges that I think entrepreneurship education starts too late. We have an entire education system that is focused on building people to become employees. And so you find that by the time people are beginning to start companies and trying and failing, it's because they're starting to learn about what it takes to make a business successful much later. I was talking to someone from Sweden, where they actually have something called summer entrepreneurship school as a government policy, where kids during holidays are, encouraged to go and start a business all the way, make some money, keep records and all these kinds of things. And then the kids who gravitate towards entrepreneurship then can take a path later on where they invest in that, but they start knowing early. A lot of us will start a business when we are retiring and you've gotten that big payout and then all the money goes missing. So I think one factor that we need to look at is how do we get people understanding entrepreneurship early? You don't make a product first and then look for a market. You look for You solve a problem, look for a market, then create a product that can feed into that market. And that's one of the basic things that now we are teaching in the incubators, accelerators, and entrepreneurship courses, that entrepreneurship is about solving problems. So even if you have an innovative product, first and foremost, there has to be a market present somewhere, either near you or in a certain locality. And that's where, when they talk about access to market information, how do you know where there is demand for a certain product that you're creating, so that by the time you're creating it, at least you've tested on a small scale, you've done some market research, given out some samples, people are now asking for more and more, and that's when you end up now ramping up production. But if you do it the other way around, you might end up stuck with something that you're creating that nobody is really willing to pay for.
And if I can jump in, I think I 100% agree with you, Joram. We do a lot of work in the county to support the public finance management practices, and one of them is Makueni. And in Makueni, what they did is the government financed the mango processing plant. But my question was, what is the market for this mango processing plant? Do you have outside channels and clear markets where you're going to send the end product from this market, from this industry? My main concern was, are you propping up an industry that naturally the market is killing off? Is there sense in trying to make sure, and I understand trying to make sure that people have a living and be able to continue to invest in in their farms and the products that they're producing, but if there's a natural propensity for the market to change and go into something else, allow it to do so. You can try to ease into a different type of industry, making sure that the residents are able to transition, but propping up a market that is dying is a big challenge, and that hinders growth, it holds people back, and it's overall bad for the economy.
Right. And Zese, talk to me about adaptation and identifying of a market, because I was speaking to an economist who told me there's no reason why someone like maybe Boniface, who was just called from Kitui making banana seeds, makes the standard size of sofa sets, knowing very well that this particular seat in Kibera will take 70% of that house. In Kilimani, it will probably take 30% of that house. In Runda, that same seat now takes 20% of the house. Is there a need to start tailoring certain things for a certain market, so that you know that this set can fit in a house in Kibra and not a one in Runda? So my target people are the ones in Kibra.
Okay, so I think we need to distinguish between domestic markets and regional markets and international markets, because I think the strategies are a bit different for SMEs depending on what market you're trying to play in. I think when it comes to domestic market, the issue of aggregate demand is important, and the issue of cost is important. When you look at price point, really becomes crucial, particularly when you get outside of rich urban areas. Price point is crucial, and so the market intelligence there really needs to be around what are people willing to pay for. When it comes to then production, the biggest problem with shifting micro and small business production is that it takes money to shift it, and then you need to know that the change you're making in what you're making is actually, people are actually going to buy that. So you may say that it makes no sense, but the reality is that it is very risky for them to stop making that sofa that size, because they don't know if people are going to buy some other sofa that they create. There's no real market intelligence to tell them this is what people want. So I think what that sort of segment has done is that they've been very creative, and they say, we're going to have a catalog, and if you don't like these big sofas that I'm making, you can tell me and I'm going to make it. So I think there is innovation around how micro and small businesses are figuring out ways to get the market intelligence that just isn't happening. I think when you're talking about access to regional and international markets, that becomes a statistics issue. And I think one of the things that I did earlier was with the ODI, we analyzed trade between Kenya and the UK, and it's very easy. You just create 4 things. Is that where is demand growing, and what are we good at? Where is demand growing, and what could we improve in? And then where is demand not growing? So it's really important when you're doing market intelligence to tell people, don't make this, because demand in this market is declining for these products. And then you allow them, the businesses, to be like, make products in these areas because this is where demand is growing. That can only be done by macro statistics over time, because those are really big trends that you can then deploy the capital to leverage that. So I think because we're not doing that level of detailed market analysis, even for Uganda, Tanzania, our biggest trading partners consistently, you're getting people just trying to figure out where market trends are going, but it's not really backed by data and statistics. But it can be. It's not hard to do.
All right, Victor, during the break, you're talking about our cost of production, and you're comparing it, saying it's not that high.
There's something I think we had discussed sometime back last year around the productivity of typical Kenyans in a manufacturing setup compared maybe, for example, to China. You'd find that it might be cheaper to pay a Kenyan, but their productivity is not as high. So probably if you go to any office, someone is sitting there, maybe just an example of productivity, someone goes to the office, spends 8 hours in the office, but actually works for 4 hours. So I think that cost is part of the cost that is really pushing our products, especially into the regional market, just, you know, making us uncompetitive. But I wanted to mention something around a study that we did last year around what we call Business Innovation Index, where we were asking ourselves, why is it that large corporates are struggling? Yeah, so we've had some flour companies shut down. We had a lot of companies indicating that they're not doing well. And from our study,
last year over 300 of them.
Yes, and one of the things that we found that is some of these large companies are not innovating enough or at all, or they don't have even money set aside to really create value. What actually happens is a lot of companies do rebranding. So it's either something with a better looking bottle, but the real product or the real value doesn't change. And part of the proposition that we're giving is, given that we know startups and SMEs actually are very creative, why can't we have some framework of sorts where we can have some collaboration of sorts, so that we are creating markets for SMEs, not in terms of B2C, but B2B. So that now we probably can be able to, you know, they can be able to access markets in terms of other bigger businesses, as well as big corporates tapping into that creativity that you have with SMEs. And we've seen this work with the value chain, the cluster at Ngong Road, where government was saying, now because we have these big housing projects that we have, we are going to aggregate you, and we are going to give you tech specs for the doors that we want, and now they're able to produce doors in mass for a market that is not ideally a consumer market.
Mwinamo, someone brought up the issue of tax breaks, and is this the direction we should take? Because now there's the turnover tax, there's presumptive tax. How do you balance between the government trying to collect enough revenue and killing the SME?
And killing the SME in the process. I think taxes we have to pay. And I think we need to get into a culture where we accept that we have to pay taxes. What needs to happen is that, and I always advise businesses from as early as possible, just get into the habit of paying taxes, because if you don't start doing that early, then later on it seems like such a large amount of money, you know, you're writing such big checks to KRA. I think we have a very resolute commissioner now, General of KRA, and they're using a lot of technology to reach as many avenues as possible. So what I just encourage people is, you know, get comfortable with paying taxes.
So we shouldn't be looking for tax breaks.
And I mean, what we can argue for tax breaks when we are paying, but when you have a very large section of the country that's defaulting.
Hold that thought for a bit. I have a call online, then I'll let you finish that. Otieno from Dono. Otieno, good morning.
Good morning to you.
Yes, go ahead with your comment or question, Otieno.
Now, Mimi.
Yes.
Hello.
Yes, nakusikia, endelea.
I have an online shop. Number one, doing business in Kenya, it's somehow challenging. First of all, you guys are talking about marketing. The first thing, we Kenyans, kuna watu wengi hatujipendi kwa sababu, for example, let me give you an example. I run a business in Gikomba, a furniture business. Unapata most of the clients, unajua when you are running a business, most of watu wameopen a showroom. A showroom you are targeting watu wenye wanapita. Those are you are targeting. So when you are talking about marketing, first of all, biashara, the idea that you have is the same idea that I have, is the same idea that the other person has. But now the question is, ni nini unaweza fanya yenye siwezi fanya? That is kitu mingi sana. Most of us tuna lack in the business. Secondly, unapata, for example, you yourself, if Mimi, I'm a Kenyan youth who is running a shop, and there is an Indian who runs the same business with me. Hatuamini kitu mwenye mimi nimetengeneza, utaamini kenye ule Indian ametengeneza, because una believe hiyo ndio quality. So those are the challenges zenye tunapata tuko nazo kwa environment ya sahi.
Okay. Thank you, Tino from Donholm. They are bringing in very pertinent issues. He says that authenticity and quality. So somehow Kenyans believe that foreign things are better than what we have. But you're finishing the story on the tax break. So it's a good thing for businesses or not?
It's a good thing for the country. Like, we need to collect tax to fund our expenses as a country, and it's just a good culture to get into early, factor into your cost of doing business, and once you do that, then you can be able to be competitive across the board. So I don't necessarily view tax as a bad thing, and if we are not paying taxes and people are not feeling the pain of paying taxes, then they don't feel the pressure to hold their government accountable, or even say, look, we are all paying now, can we have a tax break or reduce it, and more of us can pay, and then you can collect enough money. So
but isn't it easy to just amalgamate all these taxes so that when I have one form, I know I'm sorted? Now there's presumptive tax, there's turnover tax.
Definitely we have, and taxes are always tend to be a bit complicated. That's why you have tax experts there, because they also go changing every year and this kind of thing. But I would still advocate that we just get into it, because once it's passed as law, you cannot get around it. And the costs of also dealing with, if you're caught not being compliant, are quite high. And I think last year we saw a lot of people in the press being, chased down because, there are all these bills that it was claimed that you had not paid. So I think that yes, we can definitely have a simpler, tax regime, especially for smaller businesses, where you just have like one-off payments or something of a sort. Right now we have a turnover tax and presumptive tax that is trying to address that, but we still, I don't think the uptake is as much as it was hoped.
Should be, Can I just started this month. I think the turnover tax was just started in January 1st, 2020. So it's starting to be implemented. I think they started before, and then there were some problems with implementation, but now it's being rolled out now. But if you think about, I definitely agree, everybody has to pay tax. The people who are actually funding this country are people who are employed, the people who are paying PAYE. So if we can't continue to sustain a country on a small subset of people who are paying taxes. We have to make sure that everybody's paying taxes, and we're working on this with the PFMR strategy with the Treasury. I personally, my expertise is a tax expert, own source revenues. So one of our propositions to the government is that, people keep complaining about, we're going into debt. But the alternative to getting into debt is if we are able to finance our own country through paying taxes, and as responsible citizens to make sure that our country is able to provide the goods and services at scale, we should be paying those taxes. But if you look at the structure of turnover tax is only charged to small businesses that are not paying VAT. So it's not like tax upon tax upon tax. People who are already paying VAT are not going to be subject to the turnover tax. So there is some consideration on how the tax is applied. But overall, everybody needs to pay taxes in order to finance, our infrastructure, to pay salaries, to make sure that capital expenditures are catered for, operations and maintenance, and to make sure our country continues to grow.
And that's you wanted to jump on.
I think to be perfectly candid with you, if you look at the structural issues government's having with tax, there are two main issues. The first issue is the tax justice issue. If Kenyans do not feel that they're getting returns on the taxes that they're paying, people are going to fight that. I mean, whatever moralizing we do, people are not going to want to pay taxes if they don't feel they're getting a return in terms of quality of services that they're getting. So macroeconomically, government needs to deal with that tax justice issue. If you look at the specific places where government is getting tax in terms of sector, what we're finding is that even though agriculture in terms of contribution to GDP is about 35, government only collects about 3% of their tax from that sector. So what's happening is that where government is getting tax, there's a sense that there's hyper-taxation of that segment. Rather than looking at, if we're having a sector like agriculture that contributes this much to GDP, why aren't we getting the amount of tax that we should be getting from that sector? So when you're looking at tax strategy overall, I think Treasury is very cognizant of this, but what I'm not seeing is the tended attention to make sure that there is a more even distribution from a sectoral point of view in terms of where tax is being generated. Because what's happening now is that the people who have sunken costs, particularly in capital intensive places where you can't just close your shop and leave, they're really easy targets for KRA to be like, you've got to be the one that pays taxes. And I think that's where you're getting a sense from the business community that there's hyper-taxation and that there's unfair targeting, because they know that there are lots of people that aren't. I think the final thing that I want to say is that we can sit here and moralize about taxing, but if you're barely making money as a business, you're really not going to be interested in any sort of situation around tax. And when you look at where